Good evening, and welcome to episode 74 of the Political Mike podcast. On December 12th, 2017, political gravity was defied as Doug Jones, a Democrat, won a special election to fill the United States Senate seat vacated by Jeff Sessions, who was then appointed to become President Donald Trump's Attorney General. As a result of allegations upon allegations of women, many of whom publicly expressed strong support for Trump and the Republican Party, that Roy Moore, the Republican nominee, sexually assaulted them in the past, Mr. Jones found himself flipping a lot of normally red Alabama counties blue. Mr. Jones aimed to create a lead in the urban counties that include Birmingham and Montgomery, and across the band of largely black counties. Strong support for Roy Moore, the Republican, was expected in rural, mostly white parts of the state. One critical battleground was a trio of smaller, whiter cities, Mobile, Tuscaloosa, and Huntsville. Later into the evening of December 12, 2017, Doug Jones led by a large margin in Mobile County, and he also won Tuscaloosa County and Madison County, home of Huntsville. Doug Jones, a lifelong Democrat who had never run for political office before, now found himself the state's first Democratic senator in 25 years. My guest today hopes to replicate this phenomenon. Dr. Will Boyd was born in Florence, South Carolina. Dr. Boyd graduated from Mayo High School. He earned a bachelor's degree in engineering from the University of South Carolina at Columbia in 1994, a master's degree in business administration from Regis University in 2003, a doctorate in religion from Christian Bible College in 2003, a doctorate in organization and management from Capella University in 2007, and a doctorate in Christian clinical psychology from St. James, the Elder Theological Seminary in 2015. Dr. Boyd's career experience includes working as the Patriarch and Metropolitan Archbishop of Zion Ministries, the pastor of St. Mark Missionary Baptist Church, and the chancellor of St. James the Elder Theological Seminary. Dr. Boyd was the Democratic nominee in the 2018 election for Lieutenant Governor of Alabama. He was also a 2017 special election candidate who sought election to the United States Senate from Alabama. In 2016, he sought election to the United States House of Representatives to represent Alabama's 5th Congressional District. Dr. Boyd, it's a privilege and honor to have you with me as you're now seeking the seat that's going to be vacated by Senator Richard Shelby this November. And so, Dr. Boyd, I want to open up the floor. There are many who want to know, how is it that a Democrat could even win or even have a shot at winning in a ruby red state like Alabama?
Oh, so much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm excited about being on your show. Thank you for the introduction. I don't know who you're talking about with all those accolades and things like that. But anyway, long story short, I'm just a person who's humbly seeking the office of United States Senate in the great state of Alabama. And yes, sir, I do want to replicate the success we all saw in 2017. I was a part of that blue wave, as we called it, where about 6 or 7 of us jumped up and decided that we were going to run for the United States Senate. Of course, Doug Jones was in that mix. And after the primary, of course, we fell in line behind him and made sure that we did all we could to make history. So we believe the same way we did it in 17, we can do it again in 2022. We're excited about the enthusiasm, and we're just seeing record numbers of people show up to get registered. We're seeing, perhaps we can talk about it, higher enthusiasm than we've seen before. We saw that the enthusiasm was around 78% beginning weeks ago, 78% compared to 75% in 2020 when President Biden was elected, and even 66% when President Obama was elected in 2008. So what does such a enthusiasm level mean? Well, you have to compare it basically to the gap that exists. And we have the same type of gap, actually a greater gap in 2022 than really Illinois saw in 2010. In 2010, you had the state that President Obama left to go to DC, a true blue state, Illinois, being flipped, and you saw Republican Mark Kirk go to the U.S. Senate. They had a plus 19 in the red for that blue state. We're sitting on about a plus 25 right now in our quote unquote red state. So we're seeing, obviously, the enthusiasm is higher than ever. We're seeing with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, where there are more people who are showing up to vote. Alabama is one of about 8 states that is seeing about 35% increase in women who are turning out to vote since the Dobbs decision and even the leak. So we're in a very special place right now. And of course, on top of all that, you have the issues surrounding the January 6th hearing. Of course, more information coming out today about the past president and the administration. So we've chosen just to run a positive race about what we can do. And to your point, as we go further in the interview, we've just been targeting county by county, reaching out to all of those registered voters and even the ones that aren't registered, and letting them know by the 24th, they need to be doing all they can to make sure they're registered so we can go on and have a great win on November 8th.
And so, in alignment with what you were mentioning about the gaps that are prevalent in previous election maps, I'm looking at the 2020 election map with Trump versus Biden, and I'm looking at that map compared to the 2017 map in which Doug Jones flipped many counties. I'm talking about like Choctaw County, Tuscaloosa, Lee County, Hale County. I mean, when you look at Alabama, there's usually a blue belt right towards the middle of the state, and that's where you mostly get most of your blue counties. You got Birmingham in there, but as you start to move to the north and the south, you start to see very red counties. Now, many of those counties, by slim margins, went for Doug Jones in the past. I'm curious, have you found it difficult, especially in this environment of MAGA culture, where there seems to be an air of tribalism, where people put party above policy? Have you found it difficult to campaign in these kind of counties, Tuscaloosa,
No,
Choctaw?
sir. No, sir. Matter of fact, I just came back from Tuscaloosa. Obviously, I was at the University of Alabama. I'm heading tonight to more where the Auburn fans are in Lee County, one of those counties you mentioned. On Saturday, I'll actually be in Madison County, of course, in North Alabama. And the advantage I have is I still pastor a 162-year-old church in North Alabama. So I'm there every week, traveling through the 5th Congressional District. I ran in 2016, as you mentioned, against then, of course, Mo Brooks, who is still the sitting congressman for the 5th. That's, of course, been gerrymandered a bit now, so the counties don't look quite the same as they did in 16. But that all being said, I've spent a lot of time, more than 8 years, working in the North Alabama area, Lauderdale, Limestone, Madison, Morgan, and Jackson counties. Now, I don't take those counties for granted, but I spend as much time as I can there. And those red counties, believe it or not, Mr. Taylor, are really showing me a whole lot of love across the state. So I've been in Baldwin County, a place that's traditionally ruby red. I have a home in Shelby County, probably the most red county in the state, and enjoying people's support. Yesterday, I was down in Montgomery and even other areas where there was a great gathering of Republicans, particularly Republican senators, Republican representatives, and people who are in the legislature. Of course, we have a great supermajority in Alabama of Republicans. That all being said, even amongst all of those people and their supporters, I received a whole lot of love because, again, I'm trying to show what Alabama can do. Now, what I typically do in every county that I visit, I talk about where we stand as a state, and then I drill down and talk about the top 5 issues that most often affect them. I don't spend time digging into the weeds about what President Trump did versus what President Biden is doing. I talk about here's what I can do. So if I'm talking to Republicans, as I did yesterday, a primarily Republican audience, in this case, it was primarily retirees, people who are enjoying retirement. I remind them that there are 111 people who are retired. Sadly, of that group of people who are retired, not everyone enjoys what that group I spoke to enjoys. You still have people right now, again, listen to this, over 710,000 more people out there who are retired who are making only $382 more than a person who's in poverty in Alabama. We have about 800,000 people in poverty out in Alabama. So I remind people, because we've not expanded Medicaid, because we are troubled in many counties, as I told people yesterday, where we have little health care resources, high infant mortality rates, high maternity mortality rates, and then no regional hospitals on top of that. Since 2015, we've lost more than 180 beds. We've seen at least 7 regional hospitals leave us. And again, it's just a tragedy that we have counties in Alabama that we don't have hospital care. If somebody gets hurt in Aliceville right now, Pickens County, they have to drive 51 minutes to Tuscaloosa to get help. That's not right in 2022. So we send billions abroad. We help people out in other countries around the world. it's time to help people in Alabama. So I don't, again, spend time beating up parties. I bring solutions. I do this on the radio every week. I do it on television as often as I can. I let people know what we can do versus where we are right now.
And in alignment, you mentioned Shelby County. Shelby versus Holder, of course, we know was the death nail, basically, to the voting rights, or the teeth that came with the Voting Rights Act of 1964. And what I mean by that is the removal of Section 5, which required any state, particularly states that have a history of discrimination as it pertains to voting rights, had to check in with the Justice Department before they made any change to their election laws or their voting laws. Are you concerned at all about voter turnout among minorities in the state of Alabama? With the
Sure. And I apologize for jumping in there, because I talk about it every day. First of all, yes, sir, I'm in Shelby County, and we've actually seen, obviously, as you said, there was the Civil Rights Act is a beautiful piece of law, right? But the challenge is when you go around, you don't have pre-clearance. When you have congressional lines that are unfairly drawn, we've seen in Alabama where the African American voice, so to speak, has been diminished from 29% down to 14%. So you, yes, have what we call misrepresentation. We have also seen where African Americans have not shown up to the polls. Now, I want to make this very clear because I'm an African American. Obviously, I spend a lot of time talking to people who look like me, people who have the same struggles that I have, the same issues that I have in Alabama. But there are more Caucasian people in these counties that I'm talking to who did not vote as well. So I want to make that very clear. That's my disclaimer. But that being said, when I ran for lieutenant governor in 2018, the gubernatorial candidate missed sitting in the governor's mansion by 327,000 plus votes in 2018. 327,000 votes from African Americans could have shown up if the 337,000 plus African Americans that did not vote had shown up and typically leaned toward the Democratic Party. So you can see here the challenge there. That was 18. Let me make that clear one more time. Walt Maddox missed being governor of Alabama by a little over 327,000 votes. And there were a little over 337,000 African Americans who didn't show up to vote. It gets worse. There are 324,000 people, Mr. Taylor, who are batting 0 for 3. And by that, I mean they didn't show up in the last 3 elections. Goes a little further than that. There are 150,000 people we've identified in the same type demographic area who have not even voted in an off-year election like a gubernatorial race, only voted in presidentials. I can keep drilling down in the numbers, but the way we win is we talk to these people who are in these areas, remind them what's at stake. We run an issues-based campaign. I would love to say it's about will, but it's not. It's about voting rights, as you mentioned. It's about women's rights, as some have argued, and I would argue. It's about veterans getting the help, receiving the help they need through things like the PAC Act. It's about making sure that we have semiconductors here and we're not depending on foreign countries for it with things like the CHIPS Act. It's about making sure that we have freedom, or at least dependency on oil being moved away from out of our country to having ourselves independent from other countries like Russia, where they're in a war, obviously, with Ukraine. So all of these things factor in. How do we do what you said again? We go back to the issues-based campaign and we remind people what's at stake. We micro-target. We tell people county by county, here's what we think is an issue that's important to you. There are people from other campaigns, even Georgia, that have crossed over our state lines and are helping us. We have a lot of nonpartisan groups that aren't affiliated with my campaign, that are not part of anyone else's political party. They are just strictly getting out the vote. Of course, I mentioned October 24th, but we just ran across, I believe, day before yesterday, National Voter Registration Day. So we've been telling people on the radio over and over again. I was on Tuesday. Get out and vote. Your vote matters. You can't hold on to your vote and say, I'm going to keep it until November 9th. It does you no good. Exercise that right on November 8th. There's a lot at stake. And so that's how we've been approaching it. And by the numbers, I don't spend a lot of time tooting our horn, but again, Alabama is one of those states where we've seen a 3% increase alone in just women registering to vote, really between July and August, I believe it is. Now, of course, You can go back and challenge these numbers with the Secretary of State and see what he says, what he thinks about it. But 50,000 people is a lot of people, a lot of women who have jumped up and said they want to vote. So obviously people are fired up, they're ready to vote. And that's why we believe this is going to be another historic election. Now, I'll be honest with you, people aren't spending a lot of time talking about Alabama. They're focused on Pennsylvania, they're focused on Virginia, Florida, these battleground states, right? But Alabama is one of those states where we have more than two candidates on the ballot for the same offices. So I'm running against a Republican who's also in a race with me, and a libertarian, as well as at least 2 or 3 write-in candidates. Now, the libertarians tend to caucus with the Republicans, and they will actually pull Republican votes. The write-in candidates that I've seen are Republican, and so they would pull Republican votes. So you have almost a 4-way split with the Republican vote. And even if they came in at the same historical numbers as they did in the past, our numbers are still ahead. So what troubles me, being, again, very transparent, what you see is what you get with me. I'm wondering why so many people are still sitting on the sidelines and not getting engaged, not getting involved. Because this perfect storm, if that's what you want to call it, I hate the fact that we have a SCOTUS ruling. I hate the fact that veterans benefits were played with. I hate the fact that we're hearing immigration not taking it seriously in one place, and another place we're trying to do things that are extreme. I hate the fact that we are playing political football with people's lives. I do. And I'm wondering why politicians, elected officials, and people who have money are just sitting on the sidelines, not doing anything. Everybody needs to be on deck fighting right now. A lot depends on it. And this enthusiasm talking about amongst the Democrats is phenomenal. But we're also seeing an enthusiasm gap within the Republican Party alone. We're seeing where Republican men are more enthusiastic about getting out to vote than women are. So again, even though going even to Roe v. Wade, whether you're pro-life, pro-choice, I think we're seeing where even women are concerned about the fact that when you start taking away rights or playing with 14th Amendment issues that they've enjoyed for 50 years, they get concerned about that. Again, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. I believe in the sanctity of life, but I also believe that I should not be making healthcare decisions for a woman. So when you have people that talk this way, people don't want to hear it because I think people want binary people. Either you're black, you're white, you're left, you're right, you're up, you're down, you're pro-choice, you're pro-life. But there's some of us out there who keep coming to the table saying, look, there are a lot of kitchen table issues. There are a lot of millennials out there, Generation Z's out there, people out there who don't think traditionally the way others think. And we have to be willing to do what we did with Doug Jones. Talk to people, talk to union people, do what I'm doing tonight. I'm going to Lee County talking to young people, but tomorrow night I'll be with coal miners. This is what you have to do. You have to roll up your sleeves. You have to get down there and talk to everybody. That's what we did with Doug Jones. That's what we're going to do again, are doing right now. And that's how we win in 2022.
So, Dr. Boyd, your opponent, Katie Britt, is the president and CEO of the Business Council of Alabama. Former president and CEO of the Business Council of Alabama. And of course, she's going to use that to tout that she's the better candidate for small businesses in the state. I want to get your thoughts on
when people talk to me, they assume the Dr. Boyd means that's a doctor of theology, or that they think that I'm a doctorate, have a doctorate in some area of religion. And I do. I have a PhD in religion also, but my doctorates, believe it or not, are in management, in leadership. I have, of course, an MBA. I was a business professor. I was a dean at a college. So as far as businesses are concerned, I'm sure I've started more businesses than anybody that's on the ballot. As far as helping people to start businesses, that is, helping entrepreneurs to understand what risk is involved with moving forward and starting businesses. I'm a pro-labor person, but also a pro-business person. I talk to people from entrepreneur and risk-taking all the way out to what they need to do to plant more businesses and even plant internationally, to go offshore, if you would. That all being said, this idea that Only one candidate is best for business has been one that's been painted by some. But as people look at my credentials, they see clearly I'm well suited to talk about what happens in business. Small businesses make up a large part of Alabama's workforce. They need to be empowered. We need to make sure they have all the tools they need to not only compete domestically, but internationally as well. One of the classes that I spent a lot of time in, obviously, was international business. I also spent a lot of time just talking about management of even smaller businesses within the United States. Sadly, we see even back as far as 2015, actually, the last time I really taught hundreds of people in the classroom at a time, actually 2005, let me take it a little further back. You would see that even for 2005, 2015 range, the main reason businesses failed is because of a lack of understanding of finances or the death of an owner, which is the case for like a sole proprietorship or a limited liability partnership. So you have to have measures, triggers. You have to have succession plans to make sure that, first of all, you have people that can take on your business after you finish, after you decide to retire and do like the retirees I spoke to yesterday, just enjoy your life in a different way. Or if you want to continue to do what you love, make sure that from the beginning your financials are in order, that you understand what a pro forma looks like, that you understand what's involved with income statements, balance sheets, that you know what's involved with first in, first out, or last in, last out, LIFO and FIFO and all of these acronyms, and even generally accepted accounting principles. All of these things are important to understand to succeed. So I think Alabama businesses would benefit by having a former business professor or manager like myself actually as their United States Senator, because this is what Alabama needs. Alabama needs businesses to succeed. When businesses succeed, they employ more people. When more people are employed, obviously the unemployment rate goes down. When you have more money being pushed in, you can grow the economy from the ground up and the middle out, rather than taking what's traditionally been on my opposition side, the trickle down economy type of economics. So I believe a Keynesian approach, making sure you cut taxes as much as possible to allow people to do more, to be freer, especially in manufacturing, to do more, but also make sure you're giving them all the resources they need to succeed. They do well. I mentioned earlier the CHIPS Act. That's creating helpful incentives for producing semiconductors. We need more manufacturers, even in Alabama, producing semiconductors. So when we have cars that wreck, that we don't have to wait 3 months for a chip to come in from overseas so that our car can get repaired. These are things that we can do in Alabama, not just roll out TIF districts, tax increment financing districts, and attract people to come here, but we need in the long term for them to stay here. How do we attract businesses that'll stay here, invest in the community? How do we, taking it a step further, go even into high-speed rail, take some of that Department of Transportation money that we leave on the table every year, invest it in Alabama, have a high-speed rail so people can work perhaps in these areas that we talked about earlier, Birmingham, Huntsville, Mobile, a county you mentioned earlier, and then take that money back to North Alabama, Jackson, Limestone, Morgan counties, and do well. So these are things we need, not just in Madison County, where they're doing well with business, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I'll throw arts in there as well to make it STEAM instead of STEM. But we need to make sure these same business successes are achieved all over, not just in Birmingham, Mobile, Birmingham, and Baldwin, Mobile. We want to see it in Choctaw, in Greene. We want to see it in all of these Black Belt counties. We want to see them doing well. And that's what, again, my business approach to even this election, the strategies that I've used will help all of Alabama do well and do better.
Dr. Boyd, there's been a lot of concern about the messaging that the party has to do. I've already seen some campaign ads, especially in the South, where you've got Senate candidates up for re-election like Senator Warnock, who are being characterized as just going along with a radical left agenda and spending at a time of inflation. Have you found the Democrats' latest legislative victories more of a liability than an asset in Alabama? Talking about the Inflation Reduction Act that was recently passed into law, the CHIPS Act, like you mentioned, the PACT Act, also even the bipartisan infrastructure deal that was signed into law last November. In your experience campaigning, how has the messaging been getting across to voters who typically vote Republican or voters who are undecided?
I spoke to a room filled with Republicans this week, and I talked to them about the Inflation Reduction Act. And of course, they know that it's going to be something that takes time. In other words, the inflation is not going to be reduced overnight. But in it, with other bills, you have obviously things that you benefit from. So with the Inflation Reduction Act, not only did we see where, of course, 700 billion may be going to it and 400 billion may be a cost coming out. What you see is, of course, that 300 billion, and I'm just giving you rough numbers. It does help to chip away at that inflation, but with that, you get the ability of Medicare to negotiate prescription costs. It doesn't matter whether they're Republicans, Libertarians, Democrats, they get excited about that coming out of Inflation Reduction Act. With that same act, you're seeing where insulin is capped at $35 a month. Republicans are getting very excited about that. With that, you see where there is an attempt to address climate issues, and you see where obviously levels of anything that could affect our climate being addressed, being brought down even by at a certain level, 30% over the next few years. That all being said, when you roll out the fact that whether you're Republican, Democrat, the main issue on the minds of millennials is not what you or I might think. And I know you're a millennial, but it's not necessarily what everybody else might say. The economy, women's right to choose, education, healthcare. To them, to you, people in your age group, they're concerned about the climate. They're concerned about the environment. So even yesterday, when I talked about infrastructure, talked about the fact that we have Lowndes County, where people have been waiting for decades, one woman since 1987, to tap into some type sewer system or have a sewer tank that's operational. We have people out there in Lowndes County who still today do not have any way for their sewage to be pumped into another station, to go into a city sewer, or even go into a septic tank. They flush the toilet, they run water in the sink of the bathtub and pull that plunger, it goes in their backyard. So I talked yesterday, even this week earlier, about air quality, water quality, how we have contamination of the ground and the environment because of our failure to address infrastructure. We have many waterways in Alabama. We have rivers that roll through this great state. We have a port that we have to address. So when you talk about infrastructure and you talk about how that infrastructure bill helps us, people get excited about it. When you talk about I've already mentioned the CHIPS bill, but the PAC Act, and you talk about, I talked to veterans yesterday and this week. How many veterans are out there who are struggling? My own father dealt with cancer. He rung the bell, he beat it, but he was affected by cancer. He was affected by Agent Orange, a toxic chemical, while serving away in a different theater at a different time for our country. That all being said, there are veterans who feel like their lives were for a moment being treated like political footballs, and to even a comedian like Jon Stewart had to jump in and be actively involved in the fight. So, the same people months ago who may have tried to argue about these bills, they're now, many of them, going around taking credit for them. And they're saying that, what's happening to people in their districts is a success that they were part of, when in reality, they were battling it all along. So I find it kind of hypocritical that in the messaging, people say, we don't want to be a part of it. But then, of course, when that money starts rolling in, they want to be right there for the photo ops and they want to take credit for it. So I think what we have to do messaging wise, and I'll admit it, as Democrats, one of the worst things we do is we don't know how to explain our successes. We don't know how to talk about how good something is. We're still the party of FDIC, the party of NASA, the party of FMLA. We're the party that's the party that put Medicare in place, Medicaid, Social Security. We're the party that's concerned about working people, the party that's pushing for realistic wages. We're the party that's looking out for the working class, the poor people. We're the party that's saying everybody should pay their fair share. Still the party that's saying in Alabama, we don't want to see a regressive grocery tax. We're the ones who want to make sure that everything is lined up, even in terms of how we're taxed, so that everybody in our state benefits, instead of the poor being the ones who are shouldering the burden for so many. So that all being said, no, I'm not having a problem with messaging at all. As a matter of fact, I'm enjoying the fact that the White House and President Biden is doing what he's doing. People talk about President Biden, and I know they talk about me, but President Biden saw a historic turnaround in the economy coming out of the punishing pandemic by measures he put in place. Through this Inflation Reduction Act, we saw where seniors were able to receive vaccines for free. So when a lot of people start talking about these bills, but you go back in and you say, okay, here's what we're getting out of it, all of that backs up. We have to stop being so polarized. We have to stop just looking at a bill, and if it has a D behind it as a sponsor or an R behind it, we immediately want to reject it. But let's start looking at people over the politics. And I know that we say that often, but let's start looking at the bills and who it benefits, the legislation and what it intends to do, rather than trying to just say, I'm going to fall in line with the party. Now, I'm giving you another disclaimer. I don't want to get in any trouble, but we're only 7 weeks from the election. I was on Roland Martin's show this week. I'm on Chris Coleman's show almost every week, V94.9. And it is no secret. I'm not receiving any national funding. I'm not receiving any state funding. I'm being funded strictly by small donors who are giving me $2,900, and one or two unions gave me a $1,000 check. That's about it. So you do the math. But with less than 100,000, I'm putting it out there, we have done more than people with millions, because people are excited about what's being done as it relates to legislation. Now, you talked about the messaging. Mm-hmm. There are M's that I concern myself with. The right message, we have it. The right messengers, we have them. And of course, money is of great concern. With that money, we normally buy enthusiasm. We want to buy the fact that, hey, we need you excited about our candidacy. We want to be on TV the last 4 weeks of the election. We want to put commercials out and say, here's why you need to vote for me over a Katie or a John or anybody else. But in reality, we have the enthusiasm right now that money could not buy. If I had $9 million, I couldn't buy this level of enthusiasm.
Right.
People are ready to vote, and they're ready to see people like myself sit in the seat. So I'm looking forward to Reverend Senator Warnock being back in the chair, Val Demings going in Florida, a new Senate candidate, senator in North Carolina, and it goes on across Pennsylvania. I just think there's going to be a change, and I'm not just saying I want to see a blue wave, and I don't believe that anybody else who has an R behind their name is bad in any way. Don't believe that at all. I'm fully prepared to work with Republicans all over the state of Alabama. Recognize I would be working with as now the junior senator, a senior senator who is a Republican. So we have to work together. We have to. If we don't learn to do this, we're not going to succeed.
And to your point about the fundraising numbers, Katie Britt, your opponent, the Republican nominee, has accumulated almost $9 million in campaign funds, campaign fund contributions. That's according to AlabamaNews.com. Mm-hmm. And since defeating Representative Mo Brooks in the Senate nomination this past June, she has received an additional $605,500 in donations to her campaign, and that puts
we'll need every penny of it.
That puts her in the recent total of contributions at $8.7 million.
She will need every penny of it. They're going to need every penny they can to, again, get the enthusiasm and get the turnout where it needs to be. Go back and look at what we saw in 2020. Look at where we are in 2022. Just comparing numbers. Look at the turnout, the primary to general election in the last year. And you'll see, obviously, there's some reasons to be concerned. I won the primary in Alabama with over 63% of the vote and spent very little money. I just hit the road. I just visited every county I could. I knocked on every door I could. I did as much phone banking, phone time, call time as I could. I called on good friends in fraternities, sororities, churches, Masonic affiliations, called on everybody I could, working people, people who are not as wealthy, and said, I need your vote. And they showed up. So what you saw, sadly, on the Republican side is many Democrats crossed over to make sure that they had some say in who they thought should be the actual nominee on the Republican side. So you have a lot of Democrats that voted in the primary on the Republican side that are coming back home to the Democratic side because they're not happy with endorsements that have been received on that side. They have concerns about perhaps even, Mrs. Britt being affiliated with the past president. Now, I don't get into running negative campaigns at all, but when you drill down into the numbers and you start seeing what's going on, you might ask yourself, why is so much money coming into a campaign that traditionally people believe that the election's already won when they win the primary? Why is so much money still coming in? There are reasons to be concerned. And, I don't want to be or sound arrogant, but I believe if I didn't spend one more penny in this race, if I didn't knock on any more doors in this race, and we just keep doing what we're doing, we just stay on course, I believe we'll see a level of success that's going to shock some people because, again, I'm proud of the fact that it doesn't cost me a lot of money to get what others have to pay millions of dollars to get. I would love if you could have a discussion with me on November 9th and ask, how in the world did you spend so little money, receive so many votes versus being outspent many times over, and it costs so many dollars per their vote? I hope you come back to me and we have that discussion because, in my race, again, do the math. About $25 million had to be spent in the primary in Alabama, somewhere around that number. I'm just off the top of my head here now, between all the money that was spent and what did that get? Look at the runoff numbers. Look at it. It may surprise you. They didn't do a whole lot better in terms of percentages in the runoff. And they had an exciting race. They had Congressman Mo Brooks and, of course, Mrs. Britt. Should have been more people that showed up. Again, a lot of Democrats did that. I'm not in favor of, and I do not believe in crossover voting. I believe we should stay in our own elections. I believe, it should be closed in the sense that Democrats should vote for Democrats, Republicans vote for Republicans in the primaries, and in the general, you do whatever you want to do. You might vote for Republicans because you know them better. You vote for the person, right? But that all being said, and I hope every Democrat votes for me, I really do, but I'm being very truthful. I think we have to look at who's on the ballot. There are some not so good Democrats sometimes in some states. Yeah. And perhaps they're not some so good Republicans or not so good libertarians. We have to just quit blindly going to polls and start being active with voter registration, but even voter education and knowing what we're voting for. Just blindly voting for people can cost you. It can hurt you. And so you have to really get involved. When people walk up to me and we're 7 weeks away from the election, I say, hey, Will, I didn't even know you were in the election. Shame on them. Yeah. I would say if we were 7 weeks into the election and I didn't get out the vote, shame on me, because I'm knocking on every door I can. I realize, there's a primary coming up. I'm trying to tell everybody I can about the elections. Mm-hmm. People need to be more involved. But if we're 7 weeks away from the election and you don't know who's running for the United States Senate, yeah, that's not good. And that's what I'm seeing all over our nation right now. A lot of people are doing a lot of talking. They're beating up on candidates. They saying, I haven't seen the commercials. I haven't seen you on TV. Well, ask them, when was the last time you went on the internet to Ballotpedia? Or when was the last time you jumped on to Mike Taylor's show and tried to figure out, what's going on? When was the last time you tuned in to some non-partisan or non-biased radio host show and learn what issues are at stake? We have to stop being lazy voters. Exactly. And stop just sitting in a rocking chair waiting on voters to knock on our doors. Now, as candidates, we have to work hard. We have to work harder than ever. I probably live on 3 hours of sleep a day or a night, but I get it. I have to talk to a lot of people, over 5 million people I'm trying to talk to at one given time. So we have to work. Going back to where we started, I'm not at all moved by the numbers of dollars coming in. I'll take every dollar I can get. Trust me. I would love to be on TV. I would love to be on radio more. I would love to have articles in every newspaper across the state and every county. But the reality is we have the momentum. We have the enthusiasm, even with a lower approval rating initially from the White House. We were still doing well. And I think we're going to still do well. What I think you're going to see in the end is this grasping for some type relief, some type rope, some type e-stop, escape hatch. I think you're going to see where Republicans are trying to find some issue in maybe libertarians, maybe independents are going to, looking for something different that's going to cause people to turn away from this enthusiasm that we have. But all of that being said, all of that rambling I just did, I'm enjoying Republican support, Democrat support, and independent support because, again, I honor the fact that I'm running against a successful person like Mrs. Britt and her successes with the Business Council of Alabama. I'm honored that I'm running against an honorable libertarian who was able to work hard and put his name on the ballot. I'm honored. That's part of the process that we enjoy in our country. Now it's up to the people to decide who's best to serve them.
Amen to that. And I want to ask you, because the NRA has given your opponent an AQ rating. Now, an AQ rating is the highest rating someone can get who does not have a prior legislative record. In your view, does Katie Britt's AQ rating from the NRA Political Victory Fund convey that she would put the interests of the NRA above the safety of Alabamians? And I asked that in light of Uvalde. I asked that in light of past mass shootings that have crept closer and closer to home. Before Uvalde, we had the situation in Buffalo, New York, where African Americans, predominantly in the African American community, were shopping in a grocery store and find themselves victims of yet another mass shooting. The Biden administration, of course, has on its legislative victory list the bipartisan gun bill that was passed into law. What are your thoughts on her AQ rating?
Well, if that's the rating they gave her, that's fine. I'm sure they'll probably give me the lowest rating they can when they rate me, if they ever rate me. But I've made it quite clear again, I'm not trying to run a negative campaign against Katie Britt or even any other opponents that are on the ballot. But let me say this. What I am doing is I'm telling people that the nonpartisan or the bipartisan bill that was actually rolled out relating to gun legislation reform was needed. Maybe it didn't go far enough for many of us, but it was needed. It was a start. And when people say, hey, Will, where do you stand on the Second Amendment? Hey, I'm for the Second Amendment like everybody else that I know is. But I know that Alabama sees about 3,544 people injured every year because of gun injuries or guns being involved. We see over 1,500 people a year killed. We see where there are over 500 people a year who take their lives with a gun. We see there are 109,009 people on average every year who are unsuccessful, as they say. In other words, they made an attempt. So you have anywhere from 600 people who are trying to kill themselves every year with a gun. What do you do to try to combat the Uvalde issues, where there are parents who just sent their kids back to school weeks ago with chain link fences and even waiting on equipment to come in that's been promised so they can have safer school zones? Well, number one, let's start at the middle. And in the United States, I would do what I will recognize that in the middle, Republicans and Democrats agree, and even independents, that gun violence is bad. I'm from South Carolina, where there was the Mother Emanuel, issue where you saw lives that were taken. I could go around the nation and talk about the fact that even as I was going through the primary, before I even made it to qualify, I believe there were over 200 mass shootings that were already on the books. That being said, we have to start in the middle, agree that obviously gun violence is bad, but what do you do about it? Or number one, you start saying we have to address how we are seeing guns make it to the streets. Maybe we need to force the laws that are on the books. The next step, we need to go a little further than that. We need to start addressing the fact that we have these high magazine, high cartridge guns capacities that we have to address. People really need those type of guns on the street. Do we want to see, people who are out there under risk from boyfriends or girlfriends who are suffering from mental disorders or conditions, putting them in jeopardy? So you want to see what we call extreme risk protection orders in place, so that girlfriend boyfriend loophole is closed, to where those guns, by a court order, a judge temporarily takes a gun away. Not a Democrat, but a judge who's weighed the facts, rules for that particular gun to be removed. You want to go a little further than that and say, how can we move away from the code that is used to make these ghost guns where they're printed out just like a printer, and basically have no way of being traced, no serial numbers? We have to address that. Again, we're not trying to be the big brother, the police, take away anything, and violate people's privacy. But I think you have to have some level of accountability. If you're going to use a weapon that can destroy, that can even kill, take away lives, be responsible. Make sure you register that gun. Make sure you do what's needed to make sure that it's safely stowed away. And on the far extreme, yes, we want to see these weapons, assault weapons, pulled off the streets. But as a senator, I can't just jump in day one and say, okay, my proposal that we take all the assault guns, rifles off the streets. No Republican is going to listen to me. Maybe one or two may, but you have to, again, start at the level of agreement. I keep saying from the middle out, or from the ground up, start in the middle. Where do we agree? And then work your way out.
So Alabama is the home to the most historically Black colleges and universities. Alabama's HBCUs include Miles College, Stillman College, Lawson State Community College, and my alma mater, Oakwood University.
Yes.
Alabama State University in Montgomery was the first HBCU in the state, founded just 2 years after the Civil War in 1867. Cassie Ferguson, the Alabama and Mississippi director of the United Negro College Fund, said this past February that although Alabama has the most HBCUs, there's still a lack of funding to some of them because they don't have full access to federal dollars. She said there's a lot of funding they say that say an Oakwood or a Stillman or Talladega, Tuskegee, or Miles don't have access to because they're still private schools. UNCF, of course, raises money to help students attend HBCUs. And in a time when students of all races have access to any school they could choose, HBCUs grow more diverse, and international students have been enrolling in record numbers. This past March, the Biden administration announced a record $2.7 billion in funding for HBCUs. And these funds would derive from the broader rubric of the President's American Rescue Plan, which was his first legislative victory in 2021. In your view, has the administration gone far enough as it pertains to supporting financially these HBCUs, specifically the HBCUs in your state?
Right. I salute the president as far as the rescue plan goes. Salute the money that has been allocated, or at least going towards HBCUs. And I talked about it a lot on the campaign trail. Matter of fact, I have an app on my phone that showed me repeatedly that I flashed at everybody else when those dollars came available, and the benefit of them. I think you were at Oakwood University around the time that I was there for a special day when Sheila Jackson Lee showed up. And of course, we have people like her who have been fighting in Congress to make sure that dollars come this way before President Biden ever took the oath of office. So we've had people working for years. Do I want to see more? Absolutely. My parents both graduated from Benedict College in South Carolina, an HBCU. My younger brother graduated from Benedict College, an HBCU. I'm a graduate of the University of South Carolina undergrad. But as we look across the state of Alabama, member of Omega Psi Phi, that's my fraternity. But you have a number of schools out there. You mentioned one already where my frat brother is the president, Dr. Quentin Ross, but former senator. That all being said, we want to see where more dollars are coming towards HBCUs. And one of the things I talk about as relates to education is funding pre-K. Talk about preschools. I talk about fully funding high quality pre-K for every 4 to 5 year old who's not in kindergarten. I then walk through primary, secondary. I walk through higher learning, and I always stop and talk about funding HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, how important it is. You have people like the Vice President of the United States, who is a product of an HBCU. There are a lot of people who are successful out there, like yourself, doing incredible things, who are products of HBCUs. I've enjoyed the support of people who attended those schools. There's not only Oakwood University, but even go up further up. You have A&M and others in certain areas who are producing great people who are going out changing the world. So we need not just a blue collar revival, not just money going into community colleges. We need to specifically target giving more money to HBCUs. They have resources that are available to put more people out to work, to have them to do well. Again, it's not just like I mentioned, a Howard, or not just a Stillman, or not just these other places that you may roll off, but right here, Miles College, we have all of these places that really could benefit from more money. So I'm hoping that yes, more money will come their way, and I'm going to do everything I can. My power in the United States Senate, as a former educator myself, as a person who grew up watching my parents read NEA publications right here in Alabama, where I've enjoyed even the support of the AEA. I want to see and do everything I can to make sure that education is where it needs to be. Education is one of the secrets to us achieving success in business in Alabama. We have coming up in the next few years many jobs that are going to go unfilled because there are not enough people with the right skill sets. So we have to have people like these HBCUs that are grooming people, preparing people to jump into these roles. We already see where people are not happy with $7 an hour, $8 an hour. So when we go to a Burger King and McDonald's and Arby's, we're waiting because the same person who takes our order through the place where the menu is the same person who's going to take our money at the first window, and maybe even the person who gives us the bag at the second window that we pass. And then you have people who are experiencing owners high turnover because people say, if I get a choice between working a 7 or 8 hour job versus working a 15 or 25, I'm going to take that. So they're not as committed in some cases to showing up for these $7 jobs. And then you have daughters like mine who are sophomores in high school who are going to work making all A's, and then they're working those jobs at those restaurants because those are the first jobs that they get. They're appreciating those opportunities at making $7 and $8 an hour, but they want to go to those HBCUs. So eventually they can get to the business ownership point of view, employ people at the levels that they need to be, the $15 to $20 an hour, and get our economy moving where it needs to be. So this is what funding HBCUs does for us. People will say, oh, that sounds like some type of socialism or some type of, throwing money at people. No, this is investing in your future. And we don't have to talk about it, but, people even go as far as say, well, even what's taking place with the student loan forgiveness, they try to argue, well, that's loan socialism. But believe it or not, there are 43 million people who have benefited from these types of loans, and many like myself who are public loan service forgiveness plan individuals who benefit from being able to say, after we work so many years, our loans can be forgiven. Right now in Alabama, there are hundreds of thousands of students, and some are in these HBCUs that you mentioned, that don't realize that their debts can be forgiven right now. Some have taken out Pell Grants, where their family income is maybe under $25,000, and $10,000 can be wiped out right now, but they don't know it. Some who are not Pell Grant recipients could see where there is, I said the opposite way, 20,000 could be knocked out, then 10 for those who are not Pell Grant recipients. Believe it or not, there are about 20 million people nationwide who could see their loans just wiped out, forgiven. And somebody might say, well, I paid all of my student loans. I don't understand why you want to go to these HBCU students or these people who are in the, Auburn University and the University of Alabama at a tune of over 60,000. Why would you want to talk to people like that and tell them that there's a loan forgiveness program? Well, it goes back to the economy. When people are spending their disposable income on high taxes, and again, groceries that are taxed, and then they turn around and have to work 3 days to pay for the mortgage, 2 days to pay for the high price of gas, where's the money going to come from to pay off a student loan? So they don't have any disposable income. They can't put more money back in the economy. But when you free people up to do more with their money, this is why, when you roll out a stimulus check, you're not just trying to say, hey, I'm trying to give you money so you can, build up that savings account so you can have a big nest egg. No, the idea is, when you get into monetary policy versus fiscal policy, you're trying to push for money to go into the hands of people that going to turn around and buy in local economies, and then you're going to get the economy moving again. That was stagnant. I don't know if you've ever flown before or you're a pilot, but believe it or not, when a plane is doing a nosedive and the engines perhaps might have experienced some type of failure, one or two engines may have gone out of four, or one out of two, whatever it may be. You might not believe this, but one of the interesting things that a pilot would do if the plane is making a nosedive is they would push the throttle up, or they would actually go full throttle to try to get more air over the wings to give you the lift you need to bring the plane back up. Some people think, well, you spend money, it's going to cause the economy to do worse. No, when you put money into the economy, you're trying to do the same thing as wind going over the wings. You're trying to bring that lift back up so that you lift everybody. That incoming tide, as they say, it lifts every boat. So from a business point of view, from an economic point of view, when we get more people in office who understand this, who aren't just out there for their special interests, who aren't just out there to enrich themselves, I think you're going to find that we're going to be blessed in a tremendous way. Not just HBCUs, but the University of Alabama. You're going to see where Auburn is taken care of. University of North Alabama. I mean, it goes on. There are a lot of colleges out there. I'm not going to get in trouble rolling out all these different schools, right? But the point I'm making is we need to be investing in our future. We need to be taking care of our people in Alabama. And when they do that, the whole state does better.
So last two questions. Are you open to debating your opponent, Katie Britt? And
I've
also
asked
from
look, I have pictures of me. The last time I was asked about this, I reminded people I had pictures of where I was actually at an event, or I guess I was even out of state, and I was in short pants, and someone called me up and said, "Would you be willing to debate your opponent?" I kid you not, there's a picture of me in the same type setup, a blue blazer. I had on a bow tie, a white shirt, French cuffs, shorts, pants, and maybe some flip-flops, jumped in front of a green screen, got up to a reporter and said, "Yes, I want to debate my opponent." So yes, I would love it if Katie and John and I could all be on the same platform and we could debate the issues. I think that the Alabamians deserve it. I think everybody needs to see what they're going to buy. One of the things that's amazed me, Mike, is that when we go to buy a car, we look it up, we go online, do some research. We may go to Carvana, or we may go to, whoever it is, and see, what options are available, what color we want, and they can bring it to us so we can go look at it. If you like me, you might want to test drive it, right? We don't just base our vote on whether or not it's a Ford, a GMC, a Mercedes-Benz, or whatever it may be. We might have allegiance to a brand, but that doesn't mean we're going to buy a particular model, right? So with that being said, we spend over 20 minutes studying and doing research, unless we buy the exact same model we had new a year. That being said, we oftentimes invite candidates in and we say, we're going to give you 2 minutes to speak, 30 seconds to speak. In some churches or some places, we say, you're not going to be able to speak, but we would love it if you just show up.
Right.
Now, we do all of that. And sometimes in Alabama, they ask the candidates to pay $50, $30, $800 for a table, $5,000 for a table, $20,000. They want money for us to show up and say what we're running for, and we get 2 or 3 minutes to speak. How would you feel having to buy a house or a car that way? Major investment. You're about to get a U.S. senator who's going to make major decisions for you. Only 2 are in your state, only 100 in the nation. And yet you are giving her or him only a shot based on a commercial or what you heard them say in 30 seconds. By the time, Mike, I drive 5 and 6 hours to an event, I'm looking for a bathroom first. I'm saying, hey, I just need to get in a bathroom. Maybe I want to brush my teeth. Maybe I want to wash my hands. And then I want to, look in the mirror, make sure I'm okay. And then I run out. And by the time I get there and say who I am and what I intend to do, time is up. They didn't know anything about my platform before I got there. And they probably won't know as much in that 2 minutes. I jump back in the car, drive 5 hours and go back, do the same thing all over again. That doesn't benefit anybody. Put us all on the stage. Let it be televised by WVTM. Let it be publicized by, I don't care, ABC, NBC, CBS affiliate. Hey, why don't we just have the greatest one, Mike Taylor, just host the debate, and all three of us stand right there and let you lead that debate, right? That would be an awesome thing. That would give every voter the opportunity to compare and contrast, to see what one would offer versus another, and get beyond just this partisan politics idea of what a candidate's all about. So answering your question, yes, I would love to have a debate with all three of us. And yes, I have asked repeatedly. I know the Libertarian and I may be having a debate coming up soon. I've been trying to work out my schedule. There's some debates that are taking place with Libertarians and people on the Democratic ticket. But what we really need to do is have all parties on the stage. It's not fair just having one person or two show up. We need all three.
And lastly, what do you think the Senate's main priority should be if Democrats manage to hold the majority of the Senate after this November's midterm elections?
I think the main objective should be the voice of the people. And I know that sounds very generic, but it's hard just to zero in on one issue. If I talk to you from the perspective of veterans, as I said earlier, who are affected by toxic chemicals, who are exposed to burn pits, and you talking about their families and what they've struggled with. Some are not even here anymore with us. They would tell you, I just want you to take care of the veterans. If you talk to people in the same veteran communities who are in and out of the VA, who are trying to seek help, who are trying to get disability, who are struggling with mental issues, post-traumatic stress disorder, brain trauma, whatever it is, they would argue with you that mental health is the issue. And that mental health issue is not just for people who have put on the uniform. Everywhere I go, even if people want to talk about the economy, it always goes back to mental health. If I'm talking about a woman's right to choose, it always goes back to mental health. If I'm talking about even climate, believe it or not, and the environment, it always goes back to mental health. When I'm talking about COVID-19, pandemics, endemics, it always goes back to mental health. So I would love to zero in on one issue and tell you that it is the economy over here, it is choice over there, it's veterans over here, it's climate over there. But the reality is, people just want to be heard. People want to feel like their voice counts. One former president said, "There's nothing more fundamentally important than for the voice of voters to be heard." Obviously, at the polling place through the ballot box. That's what they want to hear. We represent Alabamians, two of us in the Senate. Of course, it'll be me and Senator Tuberville at the time. People need to see the two of us go in and speak for what the issues are. Once I'm elected, I'm not going in to say I'm for only Democrats. I'm going in to say I'm for every Alabamian. That's what it's all about, being that voice. That's what I've asked people all over the state. Would you allow me to be the voice? There's a show called The Voice. I think it's in its 11th year, maybe 22nd season, but they have an interesting process. They have a chair, I have a chair, not as high backed as theirs are, but they turn chairs around, and people who are the experts, the Grammy Award winners, have their backs to the performers. And in this case, it'd be people like me who want a shot. And when those performers start singing, those Grammy Award winning people, those vocalists, are able to hit a button, turn around, and basically say, "I want you." The show is called The Voice. They take them and they put them in a place where they compete, and they go on, and obviously there's a winner that comes out of it. I bring that up because when their chairs are turned around, they don't see the individual who's competing. They just go on based on what they hear. And I think if you go based on what you hear coming out of my mouth, trying to be the voice for every Alabamian, you'll hear that I don't necessarily sound like a Democrat all the time, or a Republican all the time, or the independent all the time, or a libertarian all the time. I sound like a dad. I sound like a husband. I sound like a person who sits on the church pew on Sundays, but someone who's hanging out with everybody I can throughout the week. I sound like a frat person. I sound like a person who's a Mason, or a person who travels the state quite a bit talking to people. I sound like somebody who's seeking the communities to do better, and volunteering my time to do all I can do. This is what people want. They're tired of people fighting. we're still trying to determine what January 6th was.
Mm-hmm.
People are still arguing about whether or not the election was rigged or not.
Yeah.
People are still arguing whether or not our former president is going to get indicted or charged or even thrown into jail or not. People are still arguing about whether or not we have a crisis at the border with immigration or not.
Mm-hmm.
People are still going back and forth over kitchen table issues.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why they need a person like myself and others who are committed to just being there for every Alabamian, to be the people that move on and work and serve in our state legislature, and of course serve in the United States Senate. And that's why I look forward to going back again, serving for our great state. And I look forward to November 8th being a great day of victory.
Well, Dr. Will Boyd, this has been a privilege and honor. Where could folks go if they want to donate to your candidacy? Where can they go to do that? And
thank you. I'm so glad you asked. I need every penny I can get to do what I do, even though I believe, again, as I said earlier, that enthusiasm is so high. Please visit drwillboyd.com, drwillboyd.com, www.drwillboyd.com. You want to check me out on Facebook? I'm very active there. Dr. Will Boyd for Alabama on Facebook. There's also a Dr. Will Boyd or Will Boyd, and drill far enough, you'll find me involved with a lot of other organizations doing a lot of other things. So you can find me anywhere. On Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Will Boyd for AL, Will Boyd for AL. And I could keep going, but I think that's enough to get started. If you start with Will Boyd, drwillboyd.com, you can learn everything about me, bio, platform, how to give. Even if you're an Act Blue person, there is an Act Blue link out there that ends with the word general, where you can actually donate to my campaign. But again, thank you so much in advance for giving to my campaign. I really appreciate your help. I want to thank you also for this opportunity, Mr. Taylor. You've interviewed some very respectable, honorable people, and I just thank you that you stopped to talk to a lowly little peon like me today.
Oh, no, not a peon at all.
Yes,
we want to thank you, Dr. Boyd, for running, for what you're doing, and all the work that you put in all these months, and for being a part of the Political Mic today. I had a wonderful time discussing Alabama politics with you. I think you're a wonderful candidate, and I think you hit the target on the issues.
thank you so much.
Of course, and I want to invite you all, if you were impressed by what you heard, please go ahead to that website, drwillboyd.com, donate, support. We need all hands on deck as we're getting closer and closer to November the 8th of this year. And just like Dr. Boyd mentioned, do not take this election for granted. We cannot afford to take this election for granted. Register to vote now. Make sure that you can vote early if possible. We want to thank you again, Dr. Boyd. And I want to encourage my listeners and viewers, those who tune in or those who will tune in, to, again, refrain from sketchy sources of news, challenge the sources that you do get your news from, and make sure that you make wise and educated decisions in the ballot box. Thank you so much, and thank you for tuning in to episode 74 of The Political Mic.